In the 1950s, an expensive car wasn't always simply the biggest one. Sometimes it was the most exclusive, the hardest one to get, or the one a brand built to show just how far it could go. But then comes the real question. What made an American car truly expensive in that decade? The price, the luxury, or the simple fact that almost nobody could afford to own one? Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and let's discover the most expensive American cars of the 1950s. And the first one was born as a celebration, but ended up becoming one of Buick's most desired jewels. 1953 Buick Skylark. This wasn't simply an expensive Buick. It was Buick building a car to tell the world that its first 50 years of history had not happened by accident. In 1953, the brand was celebrating half a century of existence, and instead of launching an ordinary edition with a few special badges, it decided to create something far more ambitious. A luxury automobile, exclusive and almost ceremonial, designed for buyers who didn't simply want a new car. They wanted something that said who they were. The Skylark was born on the foundation of the Roadmaster, but it felt like something else. Lower, more refined, with chrome wire wheels, special details, and a presence much closer to a show car than to a normal production model. It didn't look like a more expensive Buick. It looked like a Buick reserved for those who could pay for something most people would only see from the sidewalk. And that is the most important point. In 1953, the Skylark cost around $5,000, an enormous figure for the time. It was more expensive than many conventional American luxury cars and came dangerously close to Cadillac territory. For many families, that money could represent years of savings. For the Skylark buyer, it was the price of entering a much smaller club. Under the hood, it carried the new 322 cubic inch nailhead V8 with around 188 horsepower. It wasn't an engine designed to turn it into a sports car, but to give it authority. The power arrived smoothly with that feeling of classic American luxury, big, calm, and confident. But what truly elevated its value was its exclusivity. Buick produced only 1,690 units of the Skylark in 1953. For a high-volume brand, that number was extremely low, and that meant that even when it was new, seeing one on the street was already an event. Today, that rarity weighs even more. The best restored examples can easily exceed $150,000, and when they appear with correct colors, documentation, and a high-level restoration, they become highly contested pieces among collectors. But the Skylark is not on this list only because of its price. It is here because it represented a very clear idea. In the 1950s, some American brands could build cars that made no practical sense, but had something far more powerful: prestige. And if Buick used the Skylark to celebrate its greatness, Oldsmobile did something even more unexpected that same year. It built a car so rare, so expensive, and so special that even many classic car lovers barely know it. 1953 Oldsmobile Fiesta. This was not the Oldsmobile that most Americans knew. It was a statement of prestige. In 1953, General Motors created a small family of special convertibles to showcase the very best of its divisions. A car that looked far more exclusive than the badge on its grille suggested. And that was exactly its charm. Because Oldsmobile was normally seen as a solid, respected, and modern brand, but not necessarily as the ultimate symbol of American luxury. The Fiesta changed that, if only for a brief moment. It wasn't a model designed to sell in large numbers. It was a special convertible, loaded with unique details, with a presence far more sophisticated than that of an ordinary Oldsmobile. Even from a distance, it was obvious that this wasn't simply a more expensive version. It was an automobile created to attract buyers who wanted something rare, elegant, and difficult to own. But what truly earns it a place on this list is its price. In 1953, the Oldsmobile Fiesta cost around $5,700. At the time, that was an enormous amount. In fact, it was more expensive than several standard Cadillacs, something that sounds almost unbelievable today. An Oldsmobile that cost more than many Cadillacs. And that's exactly what made it so special. Under the hood was the well-known 303 cubic inch rocket V8, producing around 170 horsepower. It wasn't the most extreme engine of the decade, but it delivered the smoothness and authority that a car of this caliber deserved. It wasn't trying to be a sports car. It was trying to feel exclusive in every detail. and its production numbers confirm that philosophy. Only 458 units were built in 1953, all of them convertibles. That makes it one of the rarest and most desirable Oldsmobiles of the entire decade. Today, finding one in excellent condition is extremely difficult, and when one appears, it can easily exceed $150,000, especially if it retains its correct details and a high-quality restoration. 1957. Chrysler 300C. This car didn't just look expensive. It looked expensive and dangerous. Because while other luxury cars of the 1950s tried to impress with chrome trim, refined upholstery, and elegant names, the Chrysler 300C added something that completely changed the formula: real power. It was an automobile for someone who wanted to pull up to a luxury hotel with the same authority they could use to dominate an open highway. It wasn't a muscle car in the modern sense, but that idea was already in its DNA. A massive engine, an imposing body, and a presence that never asked for permission, and its price reflected that image. In 1957, a Chrysler 300C cost around $4,900, a very high figure for the time. It wasn't in the outrageous territory of the Eldorado Brougham, but it was clearly aimed at wealthy buyers, especially considering that this wasn't just another luxury car. It was one of the fastest and most prestigious American automobiles of its era. Under the hood was its greatest selling point: the 392 cubic inch Hemi V8, producing up to 375 horsepower in its most powerful versions. For 1957, that was an astonishing figure. This Chrysler could exceed 125 miles per hour, something very few large luxury automobiles could accomplish with such authority. Production was also limited. Just over 2,400 units were built in 1957, including both coupes and convertibles, and over time, that made the 300C one of Chrysler's most sought-after collector cars. Today, the finest examples can easily exceed $150,000, especially when they are well documented, properly restored, and equipped with the most desirable specifications. Before we continue, let me know in the comments: if you had to choose between quiet luxury and luxury backed by raw power, would you pick a refined Cadillac or this Hemi-powered Chrysler 300C? Tell me your opinion in the comments. 1958 Buick Limited. This car wasn't expensive because it was understated. It was expensive because it looked like everything the 1950s stood for, wrapped into one automobile. The Limited represented the very top of the Buick lineup in size, presence, and luxury. It wasn't simply another Buick with more equipment. It was the Buick for buyers who wanted something enormous, imposing, and clearly above the rest of the lineup. And that was immediately obvious. It was long, wide, covered in chrome, and had a presence that never tried to blend in. At a time when an automobile was also a symbol of success, the Limited seemed designed to say only one thing: I've made it farther than everyone else. But what truly earns it a place on this list is its position in the marketplace. In 1958, a Buick Limited could cost more than $5,000, depending on the body style and equipment. That placed it dangerously close to Cadillac territory and far beyond the reach of the average American family. It wasn't a car bought out of necessity. It was bought for presence. Under the hood was the 364 cubic inch Nailhead V8, producing around 300 horsepower. It wasn't a sports car, but it had more than enough power to move its enormous body with smoothness and authority. And although Buick was a high-volume manufacturer, the Limited ended up being surprisingly exclusive. Just over 7,000 units were built in 1958, a low figure for a model from such an important brand. It wasn't rare because Buick intended to limit production from the beginning. It became rare because it arrived at a difficult moment. Too big, too expensive, and too extravagant, just as public tastes were beginning to change. Today, that same excess is part of its appeal. The finest examples typically sell for between $60,000 and $100,000, especially when they have been properly restored and retain their original presence. It was enormous, brilliant, and absolutely impossible to ignore. 1955 Chrysler Imperial. This car was not built to stand alongside Cadillac. It was built to challenge it. In 1955, Chrysler decided to elevate the Imperial name to a much more serious level. It no longer wanted it to be simply a luxury version within its lineup. It wanted the Imperial to feel like a direct answer to Cadillac and Lincoln, more refined, more exclusive, and with a presence worthy of America's most influential buyers. And from the very beginning, the intention was clear. The Imperial wasn't trying to look youthful, sporty, or excessively flashy. Its image was more formal, more executive, more at home with businessmen, diplomats, and people who wanted luxury with authority. It was the kind of car that didn't need outrageous colors to command respect. But what earns it a place on this list is its position in the marketplace. In 1955, a Chrysler Imperial could cost around $4,500 in its main versions, while the most exclusive variants, such as the Crown Limousine, could easily exceed $7,000. That placed it in a completely different category. It wasn't an ordinary Chrysler. It was an automobile designed for buyers who wanted the very best the brand could offer, even if that meant paying prices close to, or even higher than, several Cadillac models. Under the hood was the respected 331 cubic inch Hemi V8, producing around 250 horsepower. It wasn't an engine designed to make unnecessary noise. It delivered smooth, serious power, more than enough to move this large automobile with complete confidence. Today, the finest examples can command very respectable prices, especially the rarest versions, the best preserved cars, or those with special coachwork. But its true value lies in what it represented. The moment Chrysler looked Cadillac straight in the eye and said, "We can build world-class American luxury too." 1957 Dual Ghia. This car didn't seem to belong entirely to Detroit, and that was exactly what made it so expensive. The Dual Ghia blended two worlds that, in the 1950s, almost never came together this way: American engineering and Italian coach building. Underneath, it shared its foundation with Dodge and reliable Chrysler components. But on the outside, its body was handcrafted by Ghia in Italy, with a style that was far more refined, lower, and more elegant than most American cars of the era. The result wasn't simply a luxury automobile. It was a car built almost exclusively for a very select elite. Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Richard Nixon, and several other prominent figures were associated with this model. It wasn't the car for the millionaire who wanted to shout about his wealth on every boulevard. It was the car for the millionaire who wanted to arrive in something almost nobody else could own. Its price reinforced that image. By the late 1950s, a Dual Ghia could cost around $7,500, an enormous amount for the time. It was more expensive than many traditional American luxury cars, and competed in a market where buyers were no longer thinking only about transportation. They were buying pure exclusivity. Under the hood was a 315 cubic inch Chrysler/Dodge V8, delivering enough power for smooth and dependable performance. It wasn't the most brutal engine of the decade, but that was never the point. The Dual Ghia was selling something else: international style, Hollywood prestige, and the charm of an automobile that seemed reserved for a private guest list. Its production numbers tell the same story. Only about 117 units were built between 1956 and 1958. That makes it one of the most exclusive American automobiles of the entire decade. Today, a well-preserved Dual Ghia can easily exceed $200,000, while the finest examples often sell for considerably more at major auctions. Before we continue, let me know in the comments: do you prefer the classic luxury of Cadillac and Buick, or this rarer kind of exclusivity with Italian styling and an American heart? Because after this almost secret Hollywood automobile, we're returning to Cadillac, but not just any Cadillac. 1953 Cadillac Eldorado. This was the birth of a name that would later become legendary. In 1953, Cadillac didn't need to prove it was America's leading luxury brand. It already was. But the Eldorado arrived to do something even more ambitious, to show that even within Cadillac, there could be a level that was even higher, even more exclusive, and far more unattainable. It wasn't designed for the traditional luxury buyer. It was a Cadillac for people who wanted to stand above other Cadillac owners, and that already said a great deal. The Eldorado debuted as one of General Motors' great specialty models for 1953, alongside the Buick Skylark and the Oldsmobile Fiesta. But the Cadillac played in a different league. It carried the weight of its badge, the prestige of the brand, and a presence that made it seem less like a production automobile and more like a show car that had somehow been approved for public roads. In 1953, an Eldorado cost around $7,750. That was an enormous figure. To put it into perspective, it cost nearly twice as much as many standard Cadillacs. It wasn't just expensive, it was a statement of financial power. Anyone who bought an Eldorado in 1953 wasn't looking for transportation, they were buying social status. Under the hood was a 331 cubic inch V8, producing around 210 horsepower, paired with a hydromatic automatic transmission. But its true strength was its exclusivity. Cadillac built only 532 Eldorados in 1953. That means that even when it was new, it was an automobile reserved for an almost invisible minority within the American luxury market. Today, that rarity has made it one of the most desirable Cadillacs of the entire decade. The finest examples can easily exceed $250,000, especially when they retain their authenticity, correct colors, and a Concours quality restoration. 1956. Continental Mark II. This car didn't look expensive because of excess. It looked expensive because of restraint. While many American automobiles of the mid-1950s tried to impress with tail fins, massive chrome trim, and flashy colors, the Continental Mark II took the opposite approach. Its luxury was quieter, more serious, and much harder to imitate. It didn't need to shout wealth, it suggested it. Ford created a separate division, called Continental, to build this model. That alone shows the level of ambition behind the project. It wasn't simply a more elegant Lincoln, it was an automobile designed to compete with the very best in the world, even Rolls-Royce, but through a distinctly American interpretation of prestige. And its price made that crystal clear. In 1956, the Continental Mark II cost around $10,000. That was an astonishing amount for the time. More expensive than most Cadillacs, more expensive than many prestigious European automobiles, and completely out of reach for the average buyer. For many Americans, that price was close to the cost of a modest home. But the Mark II customer wasn't comparing prices. They were buying status. Every single car received a level of attention far beyond that of a normal production automobile. The craftsmanship was meticulous. The materials were of the highest quality. And the construction had an almost hand-built feel. Its design reinforced that philosophy as well. Clean lines, elegant proportions, and a deliberate absence of excess. It was a car for someone who didn't need to prove they had money, because everyone already knew. Under the hood was a 368 cubic inch V8, producing around 285 horsepower. It wasn't an engine designed to turn the Mark II into a sports car, but to move it with smoothness, authority, and complete composure. The experience was meant to feel refined, not aggressive, and that matched its personality perfectly. The Continental Mark II wasn't selling speed, it was selling silence, it was selling exclusivity. Total production amounted to just over 3,000 units between 1956 and 1957. And while that number isn't microscopic, it remains remarkably low for a project backed by a company like Ford. Today, the finest examples can easily exceed $100,000, and particularly original, well-documented, or Concours quality cars can command significantly higher prices. 1957 Cadillac Eldorado Brougham. This wasn't simply the most expensive Cadillac. It was Cadillac trying to build the ultimate American automobile. By 1957, the brand was already the ultimate symbol of luxury in the United States. But the Eldorado Brougham stood above even that. It wasn't a Cadillac for someone who simply wanted comfort. It was a Cadillac for someone who wanted to prove they could buy the very best, even if the price made no sense to almost anyone else. And that price was staggering. The Eldorado Brougham cost around $13,000 when it was new. To put that into perspective, many Cadillacs of the era cost nearly half as much. And in some American cities, that amount was close to the price of a house. This wasn't just an expensive car, it was a public display of wealth. But Cadillac didn't charge that price just because of the badge. The Brougham came loaded with a level of luxury and technology that seemed unbelievable for the 1950s. A brushed stainless steel roof, rear hinge rear doors, air suspension, power seats, air conditioning, memory seat settings, exclusive trim, and a cabin designed to feel more like a private lounge than an automobile. It even included features that still seem extravagant today, such as a perfume dispenser, stainless steel drinking cups, and countless details created to impress a buyer who had probably already seen everything. Its production was just as exclusive as its price. In 1957, Cadillac built only 400 Eldorado Broughams. That makes it one of the most special production Cadillacs of the entire decade, not only because of its rarity, but because of what it represented. Today, the finest examples can easily exceed $200,000, while exceptional cars with concours quality restorations and proper documentation can command significantly higher prices. But the Eldorado Brougham isn't at the end of this list simply because it was expensive. It's here because it perfectly captures the entire spirit of American luxury in the 1950s. Excess, prestige, and a level of confidence that's almost impossible to recreate today. And that's exactly why these automobiles were far more than simply expensive cars. Each one represented a different expression of wealth in the 1950s. They weren't purchased simply for transportation. They were purchased for what they said about the person behind the wheel. Now, I want to hear your opinion. Of all these automobiles, which one do you think truly deserved to be considered the most expensive and exclusive American car of the 1950s? The Cadillac Eldorado Brougham? The Continental Mark II? Or perhaps something even rarer, like the Dual Ghia? Let me know in the comments, because your choice always makes these lists even more interesting. And if you enjoyed this journey through the ultimate American luxury cars of the 1950s, don't miss the video that's on your screen now, where we explore the most elegant American luxury cars of the 1960s. Click on it, because in the following decade, luxury changed its shape. It became lower, cleaner, more modern, but just as unforgettable. I'll see you there.